This video is brought to you by Squarespace. Last month, I gave you my thoughts and predictions for Warhammer the Old World. And as it turned out, some of those predictions actually came true. So today, I'd like to talk about all of the new releases for the Old World, which ones I got right, which ones I got wrong, as well as answering a ton of your questions, comments, and criticisms from that first video. Let's get started. A few days after I published my first Old World video, this article got posted to Warhammer community. And in this article, they discuss all of the new and returning models for the Orcs and Goblins range. No release dates or prices yet, but just to be smug for a moment here, it's pretty close to what I predicted. But I did get a few things wrong here. First things first, it does look like we are getting a similar style of big box for the Orcs and Goblins, with a similar amount of models to what I predicted, so I was right about that. No word yet on whether this will be a solo release or whether we will get a dwarf box alongside this, but the one big promo image we do get of the Orc army does show them fighting against some rather stout-looking, bearded type folks, so I guess we will see about that. In my predictions, I said I wasn't sure whether this box would contain the rulebook or not, and it looks like it is not going to contain the rulebook, so that's actually kind of a relief, at least from the comments section, and for me personally, I'm much more likely to purchase this box if I'm not buying another copy of the rulebook that I already own. And as it turns out, I was wrong about at least one thing in this release wave, as I predicted the big Orcs and Goblins box would come with at least one new model inside, and as it turns out, it's just entirely old stuff, which in my opinion is both a blessing and a curse. As well, it would be cool to get a new hero model in this box like we did for the Bretonnians and Tomb Kings, but without any new models and without the rulebook, my hopes are actually pretty high that this box will be at a more reasonable price point, and maybe will be more like the start collecting box for this faction. Moving on, I predicted we would get at least one or two new Forge World models for this faction, and I was right about that. As we are getting two, I guess technically three new models for this range, so that's pretty cool. One of these is some kind of war boss, and the other one is, I think, a shaman with pot grot, and both of them would be something I would consider picking up even if I'm not painting an orc or goblin army. As for the returning plastic models for this range, this is actually something I didn't touch on in my first predictions video, but it does look like we are getting a number of plastic kits returning for the Orcs and Goblins range. And while we're talking about this, I just wanted to note that I really like and respect this new thing they are doing with their promo shots. They have these little stamps in the corner saying returning plastics or returning metals or returning resin. It is both nice to have that layer of transparency, as I was a bit confused with a lot of the initial release wave models when looking at the promo shots, what they were even made of, but this new little stamp makes it seem more like a exciting reveal of which new models are returning, more like a Smash Bros returning fighter, which one's going to return next kind of thing, rather than a, oh, by the way, those old models are in the store again. And it looks like for most of these plastic kits, much like the Tomb Kings, they're going to be doubling up the size of units for the boxes they're selling them in, and I would predict they will be similarly priced as well. After this, we get a nice gallery of all the returning resin models, as well as some returning metal models that are now being produced in resin. And once again, we get these cute little stamps to indicate what they're made of. Huge fan of that idea. And yeah, I'm a big fan of a lot of these, especially the goblins. And if I can afford these models, depending on how they're priced, I'm definitely thinking I want to buy all of those returning Goblin Hero models. They would be really fun to paint. As predicted, we're also going to be getting some returning metal models on a made-to-order basis, like we did with the Bretonnians and the Tomb Kings. And to be completely honest for just a second, I have a huge secret which I'm about to reveal right now. I have always wanted some of these retro troll models. They are just so cute, so iconic, and they really remind me of what I associated Games Workshop with in the 90s. So that's definitely going to be very high on my list of something I would like to purchase if I can afford it when they come to made to order status. So that is it for all of the new and returning models for orcs and goblins. And as for my predictions, I feel like I was right about a lot of things. I was wrong about a lot of things, but overall, in all of the cases where I was wrong with one of my predictions, the result is better than expected. So that is quite exciting. If you can't tell, I am quite excited about the old world at this point, and it's just looking better and better the more things that are revealed, in my opinion. It is also mentioned in this article that we will be getting restocks of the Tomb Kings and Bretonnian boxes coming soon, so that's encouraging as well. I didn't realize that those weren't FOMO boxes. I just assumed they were from their presentation and their cover artwork, but I guess no, we are getting returning stock of those as well. So that's pretty exciting if you weren't able to get those boxes the first time around. Finally, there was one new old model announced for the Bretonnian faction, which I will definitely be picking up when it comes out. This model was sculpted in 2008, but for whatever reason was never released to market. And can I say, I just love this model so much. He's really characterful, really retro looking. And the more that I get into the old world, this is more of what I want from this game. I would love it if we get more traditional looking green stuff sculpts, things that play into that retro flavor, more prototypes that were never released. I think things like that really give this game its own unique appeal. So that is about it for Square Base news this month. But before we move into your questions and comments from the last video and talk a little bit more about the old world, I would first like to talk to you about something that is also very Square and also very based. That's right, it's this video's sponsor, Squarespace. Squarespace is the all-in-one website and hosting platform that I have been using for over a decade now for all of my website needs. And it's extremely easy to use. You just pick from one of their gorgeously designed pre-made templates, add in any extra features or plug-and-play elements that you might want, and then customize things to your heart's content using their extremely intuitive drag and drop grid system. No coding or technical knowledge required. I've been using my current Squarespace website over at howlcorp.com to host a gallery of my painted miniatures, all of my painting reference documents, as well as my online store where I can sell anything I might like. So if you need a website, why not check out squarespace.com today for a free trial. And when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/DanaHowell for 10% off your very first purchase of a website or domain. So without further ado, let's answer some of the Square-based comments from the previous video. Featherus_ says, "This is honestly what I expected them to do. The Tomb Kings and Bretonnians were first as they were the longest gone, but I expect each army in the books to get a box and new range every few months, hopefully followed by the new armies from Total War they teased right at the start of the Old World's announcement." So this comment is not unique. There were a lot of comments like this in the comments section, some nicer than others, but a lot of people were saying like, yeah, obviously your predictions are pretty much what we all expect, that it was somehow obvious that we would be getting big boxes for each of the new armies throughout this year. And yeah, I guess that's fair enough. Maybe I am completely out of touch. Maybe it's me that's wrong. But at the time when I scripted that video, I hadn't seen anyone else talking about this. I hadn't seen anyone else predicting what we might be getting beyond the hype cycle of the Bretonnians and Tomb Kings. So I just wanted to make a video about it because I had personally been thinking about it and I thought it was a fun thing to speculate about. Grey Wolf Slayer says, "Brilliant as ever. I'll add one more thing into the mix. I predict that in summer, they'll surprise us all and release an updated Battle for Skull Pass 2-player box set." There was actually more than one person who left a comment like this, and yes, 100%, I really hope this is the case, and I think it's even more likely now that we've seen the big Orcs and Goblins range reveal, as I don't know if you noticed, but the one big part of the Orcs and Goblins army that was missing from that range reveal was a lot of the Goblin stuff. There was no Night Goblins, no Spider Riders. Maybe it's because we have some of those models already as part of the Age of Sigmar range, but we can only hope it's because we are secretly going to be getting a re-release of Skull Pass later on this year, hopefully. I would 100% buy that immediately, no matter what price they ask for it. I shouldn't say this because they will take it literally and they will price it out of my price range. But yes, please re-release Skull Pass. That would be amazing. Great comment. Lord Fawful 13 says, my biggest argument against the FOMO marketing is the fact that GW has stated that these boxed sets are being manufactured under their normal process and are not being advertised as limited quantity. It's going to be interesting to see them roll out new products for this line. I just wish they didn't exclude all the armies I wanted to collect. And yes, while I agree that it is sad we aren't getting all of the returning armies getting full support, it would be a lot to update all of those armies. So I totally understand why GW isn't doing that immediately. And yes, I agree, I did get a few things wrong in that first video, so thank you for the correction. Lord Fawful, I am sorry, I should do better research in the future. However, to be honest, I still think a lot of this reeks of FOMO marketing to me. This is not really a criticism of GW as a company, as more, this is just the reality that we live in now. A lot of these types of hobbies run on that FOMO hype cycle. Not to mention that a lot of the coolest models that have been released for the old world have been made to order limited quantity releases. But even with some of the non-limited release stuff, like a lot of GW product, they sell out pretty quickly and we have no idea when we're gonna get a restock. So whether the company intends for this to be FOMO marketing or not, we are still living in this cycle of hype for new stuff. It's selling out quickly and then we still have to wait for restocks. We have no idea how long that's going to take. Not only this, but I feel like it was a pretty tactical decision to not show us anything about the Orcs and Goblins release wave until the pre-orders for Bretonnians and Tomb Kings were all nice and done with. However, I don't want to be too negative here or too critical, but I think ignoring that this is a FOMO release schedule sort of product is just sort of choosing to ignore the environment we're living in. However, with all that said, I am still feeling very hopeful for the Old World's release schedule going forward into this year. As at least with the Orcs and Goblins release announcements, it looks like the goal here is to just get these old kits back into production and available for everyone as much as possible. So that is great to see. I am a huge fan of that. Toothless Vagrant says, could you take a peek at Kings of War and give us your thoughts? I fell in love with Mantic and their goal to make great game rules years back and wouldn't even consider buying into Old World. Interesting. So I've actually got quite a few comments like this telling me to try Kings of War, Conquest Last Argument of Kings, or Oathmark if I wasn't happy with the way the Old World was going. And to be quite honest, while I am intrigued by some of these model lines and some of these games, I think these comments might be misunderstanding why I'm interested in the Old World in the first place. And that reason is fully nostalgia. I love 90s Games Workshop. I love the dream that those old catalogs promised us, of huge, colorful armies displayed on a big, colorful grass table. And the Old World coming back for me personally is more of an excuse to recreate these nostalgic battlefields, these nostalgic armies for myself. This hobby has many facets to it, and I would say I am a painter first, a collector and lore nerd second, and an actual game player third. Actually playing the game is something I would like to do, but it's at the bottom of my priorities list. So unfortunately, no matter how good the gameplay of these games are, no matter how much cheaper than the old world they might be, most of these other rank and flank games don't really do it for me, because I'm more in it for that 90s GW nostalgia than I am for a military fantasy war game. And if I'm honest, what I would really be looking for in an old world competitor is a game that leans into that old world retro aesthetic more than the old world does itself. Similar to what Old World Essentials does for classic D&D, or Sorcery Contested Realm does for classic Magic the Gathering. If someone came out with a rank and flank game with all old green stuff sculpts and a really retro graphic design style to it, that would be more the competitor that I'm looking for than a more modern looking rank and flank game. And just based on the way the market is going, it wouldn't actually surprise me that much if we saw a game like that emerge within the next decade. And speaking of retro old models, let's get to the big question, the big source of comments in that first video that I wanted to address. One of my biggest criticisms of the old world that I had in that first video was that we shouldn't be paying this much money for what are essentially 20-year or older models. And I have to say, now that I have the Bretonnia box in hand, I bought it with my own money, I have fully changed my mind about this, as the entire box feels very much worth the price that I paid for it. The new rulebook is quite meaty and quite beautiful, fun to read, even as someone who isn't planning on playing the game within the next 6 months probably. And after assembling even a few of the models, I really feel like I didn't get ripped off paying what I did for these old models. I definitely didn't get a bargain on these models, they're not cheap or anything, but they do feel worth it to me. And I have to admit, looking back on the price criticism that I was giving to this game, I was more comparing it to something like the video game industry. As often in video games, we will get re-releases of old games on new consoles, sometimes in the form of an HD remake, or sometimes it's just the game itself being put on a new console. And the conversation around that, I feel like, is always, should we be paying $80 for what is essentially an old game that we can buy for cheaper, that we may have already played before? But I think what I failed to consider when applying this logic to the miniatures world is that video games are really experiences first, or media first, and collectibles second. Whereas to me, and probably I think a lot of people, Warhammer models are collectibles first and experiences second. So really a better comparison than the video game analogy would be retro toys. Would it be fair to re-release a classic toy released in 2004 in the modern age for modern day prices? And for that, I wouldn't bat an eye, I would be excited about it. And I think that is a good summary of why I think these old models are worth paying for. And I think in that sense, to me, it feels really worth it to purchase these old models for the prices we're getting them for. And it is actually this factor that makes me so excited for the old world going forward. It's probably the most excited I've felt for a miniatures game in quite some time, probably since Shatterpoint last year. As questions like, is the old world a good game? Is it worth the money? I feel don't matter to me as much as they did a few months ago. The main thing is for us retro model collectors who just want to collect and paint some of these old models, we finally have an accessible way to get copies of these models that aren't covered in old paint on eBay, and sometimes the eBay prices for some of these models are actually quite high. So yeah, I've been painting old world models, I've been assembling my Bretonnia set, and I am quite excited about this game. It's a really nice, refreshing sort of model to paint and assemble compared to the more modern GW stuff. But yeah, that's pretty much it for today. I just had a whole bunch of unrelated old world thoughts that I wanted to get out of my system And it seems like you viewers are enjoying the Old World content as well, just based on the engagement that last video got. Thank you so much for watching as always, and if you'd like to see this video ad-free, make sure to go and check out our Patreon over at patreon.com/DanaHowl, where you can get your name up in the credits right now, gain access to ad-free videos, as well as our extremely exclusive, inclusive miniature painting Discord server. And with all that said, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.